Have you ever imagined what happens after death? Some say it's the end, but what if I told you that some people have already died and come back to tell what they saw on the other side? That's right, they went beyond, experienced something that challenges everything we know about life and death. And now, they are here to share these shocking experiences. You will be stunned by what these people have revealed. In this video, you will discover real and absolutely chilling stories of individuals who went through clinical death, and what they saw when their hearts stopped beating will change the way you see life after death. These stories are not just ordinary accounts. They are revelations that will make you question everything you know about death. The promise is clear. You will never look at death the same way again after watching this video. Stories that will leave you speechless, revelations that will drop your jaw, and experiences that may turn your worldview upside down. And I want to know where you are watching from. Comment below and tell me what part of the world you are in. I will try to respond to everyone. Also, if you've ever had an experience or know someone who has gone through something similar, share your story in the comments. Who knows, your story might appear here on the screen for the whole world to see. Don't waste any time, stay until the end, because what's coming is simply incredible. Do not leave this video now. What you are about to discover will leave you speechless. Let's explore these mysteries together, and who knows, you might find the answer you've always been looking for. What happens during clinical death? Clinical death is one of the greatest mysteries of medicine and science, and even today, many try to explain what really happens at that moment. Technically, clinical death occurs when the heart stops beating, breathing ceases, and vital signs disappear. However, what makes this so intriguing is that in some cases, a person can be revived, bringing back frightening and often surprising accounts of what happens on the other side. During clinical death, the body enters a state of total shutdown, but the minds of some people seem to continue functioning in mysterious ways. Many of these individuals describe intense, often inexplicable experiences that happen when they are on the verge of death. Some claim to have undergone a true journey to the beyond. One of the most common experiences is the sensation of leaving the body. People report floating above their own bodies and observing doctors and nurses trying to resuscitate them. This is known as an out-of-body experience, OBE. But what really happens at that moment? Some say their souls are being pulled into another dimension, to the other side. Additionally, there are reports of intense spiritual visions. Some people claim to see a tunnel of light in which they are guided by a mysterious figure. Others talk about encounters with deceased loved ones who welcome them with open arms, giving them an immense sense of peace. For many, this is a transcendental experience, as if they were crossing into a world beyond our own. However, not all accounts are peaceful. Some people speak of an absolute sense of terror, of a deep and distressing void, as if they were being pulled into an infinite darkness. These dark accounts make it clear that clinical death can be as terrifying as it is beautiful, depending on who experiences it. Do all these experiences have a scientific explanation? Or do they reveal something more, something we have yet to understand? The mystery of clinical death remains a scientific and spiritual frontier, and what happens during this crucial moment of life may be more than just a temporary failure of the body. It may be a window into the unknown. Shocking stories of clinical death. Clinical death, this moment of total shutdown of the body, is a phenomenon that challenges all our conceptions about life and death. The stories of survivors who have gone through clinical death experiences are absolutely chilling and often transformative. Let's explore 7 impactful accounts of people who crossed the line between life and death and what they saw, heard, and felt on the other side. 1. The encounter with the deceased father. A woman, after suffering a serious car accident, had an experience that changed her life forever. During cardiac arrest, she reports seeing herself floating above her body, watching doctors trying to revive her. She was then pulled into a tunnel of light where her father, who had passed away years before, appeared. They embraced, and she felt an indescribable peace. "I never imagined that love could be so strong on the other side," she said, emotional. When she woke up, she felt transformed, with a new perspective on life and death. 2. The bright light and the final judgment. A middle-aged man suffered a heart attack and was declared dead for several minutes. When his heart was restarted, he had a vision of a bright light, accompanied by a feeling of judgment. He saw himself before a divine figure where all his actions throughout life were evaluated. He describes the sensation as a mix of fear and regret, but also of forgiveness and acceptance. "I knew I was being judged for every thought and action, but in the end, I felt a peace I had never experienced before." 3. The child and the angel. A child of only 7 years old suffered a serious accident and entered clinical death. She reports seeing an angel who guided her through a lush green field. The angel told her it was not her time and that she needed to go back. During the experience, she felt an absolute sense of love and belonging. When she woke up, she didn't know how to explain it, but she knew there was something much greater beyond life. To this day, she describes this encounter with the angel as something that changed her life, giving her unwavering faith. 4. The dark path to the light. A man describes his experience after a motorcycle accident where he entered clinical death for a few minutes. He saw himself in a dark tunnel, feeling as if he was being pulled into something evil. Then he was enveloped by an intense light and felt a warm embrace that dispelled the fear. When he woke up, he was overwhelmed with gratitude for life and the simple moments we often take for granted. 5. The vision of the mother and the choice to return. After a cardiorespiratory arrest, a woman saw herself in a serene place, surrounded by indescribable peace. She reports seeing her deceased mother, who smiled at her and asked a question. "Are you sure you want to return? Your mission is not over yet." Although the woman felt a wonderful peace and did not want to return, she chose life, knowing she still had something to accomplish. When she woke up, she had a new purpose and a feeling of connection with her mother, as if she was still with her in some way. 6. The game of lights and shadows. A man who was declared dead after a work accident describes an impressive experience. He was taken to a field of intense lights, where he could see shadows moving around him. Some of these shadows seemed human, others did not. He reports suddenly feeling as if he were in a place where souls were being tested. The man, terrified, felt as if he was being watched by invisible forces. When he woke up, he was completely transformed, with a new sense of urgency to live his life with purpose. 7. Death and the return to the past. A woman who suffered cardiac arrest for more than 10 minutes has a clinical death story that brought her visions of her own past. During the experience, she relived important moments of her life, both good and bad. The most impactful moment was when she revisited a mistake from her youth, something that haunted her. In that state, she felt as if she was being led to a kind of universal forgiveness, an acceptance of who she was. When she returned, she felt at peace with herself, something she had never experienced before. Emotional detailing of the stories. Each of these stories carries a heavy and transformative emotional burden. The people who have lived these experiences have felt profound emotions, from indescribable peace to terrifying fears. Many returned with a new understanding of life, death, and what may exist beyond the end of our physical existence. For some, these experiences provided emotional healing from old traumas, while for others, it was a true reconfiguration of their own faith and life purpose. These stories make us reflect. Is clinical death just the end, or is there something more beyond it, something we cannot fully comprehend? The experiences these people have gone through may be just a glimpse of something still beyond our understanding. And who knows, the next story we hear could be yours. The emotional and spiritual consequences. Clinical death experiences not only alter the physical body, but also provoke profound transformations in the emotional and spiritual fields. Those who return from this threshold between life and death often describe a new worldview, a new perception of themselves and of what truly matters. Let's explore the changes these experiences generate and the eternal confrontation between skepticism and faith. Profound changes in the perception of life and death. For many people, going through a clinical death experience is a turning point. They report dramatic changes in their perception of life, death, and what may exist beyond. Some say that upon returning, they felt more spiritual and connected to something greater than they had ever imagined before. For many, death ceases to be a fear, a terrifying threat, and begins to be seen as a natural passage, a transition to a new form of existence. One of the most common reactions after clinical death is the feeling of no longer fearing death. People begin to see life from a calmer perspective, understanding that the end is not the end of everything, but merely a change of state. This perception can have a profound effect on their mental and emotional health, since by freeing themselves from the fear of death, they feel more able to live in the present more fully. Furthermore, many report a deep sense of mission after the experience. The feeling that their lives have a greater purpose, something that needs to be fulfilled. Some become more compassionate, others decide to change their careers, relationships, or even their own spiritual beliefs. It's as if the experience of clinical death was a revelation that set them on the path to a more meaningful life connected to the divine. The search for spirituality. This spiritual renewal is not just a change in attitude, but, for many, a true transformation of the spirit. Many of these people begin to explore spiritual or philosophical practices they had never considered before, such as meditation, deeper prayers, or even holistic therapies. They feel, with overwhelming certainty, that there is something beyond the physical world, and that their clinical death experience was confirmation of this something more. The conflict between skepticism and faith. Of course, not everyone shares the same view. While many return from these experiences with renewed faith, there is also a large number of skeptics who seek scientific or psychological explanations for what happened. For skeptics, visions of light, encounters with deceased loved ones, and even feelings of peace or fear are merely hallucinations caused by a lack of oxygen in the brain or abnormal electrical activity during cardiac arrest. For them, what clinical death survivors experience are just temporary effects of a brain malfunction and not proof of life after death. Skepticism fuels the idea that our minds are capable of creating illusory experiences that make us believe in something beyond death, as a way for the brain to deal with stress or imminent trauma. For these people, the scientific explanation is sufficient and closes the debate about what really happens after we die. On the other hand, those who believe these experiences prove the existence of life after death see each account as irrefutable evidence that consciousness does not disappear when the physical body ceases to function. These accounts are often seen as windows to the beyond, offering a glimpse of what might be waiting for us after physical death. For these people, near-death experiences are not mere coincidences or illusions, but rather proof of a greater and deeper spiritual truth. The emotional and spiritual impact of the experience. Regardless of whether they are skeptics or believers, the impact of a clinical death experience is never superficial. For those who believe they saw something beyond death, the return is often accompanied by a sense of gratitude and purpose. They feel closer to a greater and more interconnected universe, where death is not the end, but a continuation. And even for those who seek more rational explanations, the experience changes their perception of life and death, generating a deep reflection on what truly matters. In the end, the experience of clinical death, whether to strengthen faith or awaken skepticism, marks an emotional and spiritual transformation that alters how these individuals see themselves, their beliefs, and the very concept of existence. It's as if, by crossing this threshold between life and death, they had been touched by something greater than themselves, and that feeling would never leave them the same. Conclusion. skepticism, or faith? The choice is yours. These stories are just the beginning of a much larger conversation about what really happens when life fades away and death approaches. What do you believe? Are clinical death experiences just hallucinations, or is there something real and spiritual happening on the other side? Leave your opinions in the comments. Let's continue this conversation together, exploring the mysteries of life, death, and everything in between. Remember, clinical death experiences have the power to completely transform how we see the world. What do you think? Have you ever gone through something that challenged your view of death? Share your story with us. Testimonies from scientists and experts. Clinical death experiences have always been a mystery that piqued the curiosity of scientists, doctors, and specialists from various fields. These experiences, which often involve encounters with deceased loved ones, journeys to the other side, or sensations of absolute peace, challenge the traditional understanding of death and consciousness. But what do experts say? Are there scientific explanations for these accounts, or are we dealing with something beyond human comprehension? Scientific theories about clinical death experiences. Several scientists have tried to explain clinical death experiences based on brain function and physical processes that occur when the body is near death. One of the most common explanations involves brain activity, which can be intensified during moments of great stress or lack of oxygen. According to the neurobiological theory, during cardiac arrest or oxygen deprivation, the brain may enter a state of hyperactivity, producing visions, sounds, and sensations that seem very real but are actually hallucinations. Experts state that as the brain dies, it may go through a series of chemical reactions that generate vivid and intense experiences. A common phenomenon, for example, is the perception of a bright light or tunnel, which many clinical death reports describe. This vision may result from a sudden increase in levels of endorphins and other neurotransmitters that occur in moments of extreme pressure on the body. Furthermore, lack of oxygen can cause brain cells to fail, leading to the activation of neural networks in an unconventional manner, creating out-of-body experiences or a sensation of traveling to another place. While this scientific explanation is plausible, it remains debated, as it fails to fully explain the richness and depth of many of these experiences. The theory of transcendent consciousness. On the other hand, there is a more intriguing theory that has been gaining increasing attention among researchers: the idea that consciousness is not restricted to the brain. According to the theory of transcendent consciousness, the human mind may continue to exist even after the physical body dies. Some scientists and philosophers argue that consciousness is not just a function of the brain, but something that can survive bodily death, a form of energy or information that transcends the physical. Consciousness, according to this theory, may be an independent entity that does not rely on biological structures to exist. Researchers like Dr. Ibn Alexander, a neurosurgeon who had his own near-death experience, claim that consciousness can remain alive after clinical death, challenging everything conventional science believes. Dr. Alexander shared his own experience in his book, Proof of Heaven, where he describes how, during his clinical death, he was able to experience a reality beyond physical life and interact with spiritual beings. This kind of research leads some scientists to question whether the human mind might be more than just a biological machine. If consciousness transcends the physical body, it raises a vast range of questions about what truly happens after death and whether an afterlife is a real possibility. Research on the topic of clinical death. In recent years, various scientific studies on clinical death and near-death experiences have begun to gain prominence as more and more people share accounts of their out-of-body experiences. One of the most famous studies on the subject was conducted by Dr. Pim van Lommel, a Dutch cardiologist who spent years studying patients who had survived cardiac arrests. In his research, Dr. Van Lommel documented how many of these people reported vivid experiences during clinical death, including encounters with deceased relatives and a profound sense of peace. Van Lommel's study suggests that consciousness may not be exclusively tied to the brain, and that in some way the mind may continue to operate even when the body is clinically dead. His research, published in The Lancet, one of the most respected medical journals in the world, raised questions about the concept of consciousness and challenged traditional explanations that limit the mind to brain activity. Additionally, other studies have investigated the phenomenon of out-of-body experiences, OBEs, where individuals report the sensation of seeing themselves from outside their own bodies. These experiences are often cited by those who have undergone clinical death, and scientists such as Dr. Sam Parnia, a specialist in intensive care medicine, have dedicated themselves to investigating the nature of these experiences, exploring what happens to consciousness when the body is technically dead. One of the most intriguing questions is the evidence that clinical death experiences can, in fact, occur at times when there is no measurable brain activity. This suggests that consciousness could indeed be independent of brain function, something that remains a topic of debate in the scientific community. The future of clinical death research. With advancements in brain imaging technologies and the growing number of reports from people who have experienced clinical death, science is beginning to question its own limitations regarding the understanding of consciousness and life after death. Although conclusive proof is still lacking to assert that consciousness survives death, the accumulated evidence is increasingly challenging the traditional scientific view of the end of life. Research on clinical death continues to grow, and new studies may finally offer answers to some of humanity's oldest questions. Does consciousness truly survive death? And if so, what does that mean for us as human beings and for our understanding of life and death? The question remains open, and science is still far from providing a definitive answer. But one thing is certain: clinical death experiences continue to challenge our understanding of what really happens when life fades away, and these accounts may be more than just unexplained phenomena. They could be the beginning of a new era of understanding about consciousness and life after death. The fear of death and the search for answers. Death is undoubtedly one of humanity's greatest mysteries, and its understanding has been the subject of reflection and speculation throughout history. The fear of death is a universal human emotion, a feeling that has accompanied us since the earliest moments of our existence. This fear can be both a source of anguish and a motivation, driving the search for answers about what happens after life ends. Death is often seen as the great unknown, and human beings, with their need for understanding, have dedicated themselves over the centuries to seeking explanations for this mystery. The search for answers, a universal desire. The desire to understand death and what comes after it is, in many ways, a spiritual and philosophical quest. Due to the finite nature of human life, this questioning about existence after death emerges as an attempt to give meaning to what appears to be an absolute end. For many people, death is seen as a point of transition, not a definitive end. This desire to find answers is one of the deepest impulses of the human soul, a desire for the certainty that life does not completely vanish with physical death. People who have had a clinical death experience often report that this search for answers intensifies after their other side experience. Accounts of encounters with deceased loved ones, visions of bright lights, and sensations of peace and tranquility lead many to believe that death is not the end, but a passage to something more. These reports often serve as a form of comfort and hope for those who fear the unknown, offering them a different perspective on death. Furthermore, the fear of death is often associated with the fear of suffering, loss, and uncertainty. Many fear not only the end of life, but also what may come after it, a feeling of emptiness, of being forgotten, or even of being judged. Thus, the search for answers about death is not just about wanting to understand what happens afterward, but also a way to confront these existential fears that are inherent to the human condition. Popular beliefs, cultural and religious differences. The concept of life after death has been interpreted in very different ways across cultures and religions. Each tradition offers a unique perspective on what happens to the soul or consciousness after death. These beliefs, often passed down from generation to generation, serve as a way to give meaning to death and provide comfort to the living. For example, in Christianity, the predominant belief is that death is a passage to the final judgment, where souls will be judged and sent to heaven or hell based on their actions during life. For Christians, life after death is central to faith, offering the promise of an eternal existence alongside God after earthly suffering ends. In Buddhism, death is seen as part of a continuous cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. The concept of reincarnation, the idea that the soul can be reborn in a new body, is a fundamental belief. In this context, death is not the end of existence, but a transformation and transition to a new form of life. Islam teaches that death is a transition to the afterlife, where a person is judged based on their deeds and faith. The final destination is either paradise, where the righteous will be rewarded, or hell, where the wicked will suffer. For Muslims, death is a natural part of the divine plan, and the afterlife is a matter of faith and morality. These religious views provide a framework of meaning and purpose that can alleviate the fear of death. Interestingly, many of the experiences reported by people who have gone through clinical death align with these beliefs. Clinical death experiences and popular beliefs, the intersection of science and spirituality. When people who have been close to death report encounters with deceased loved ones, visions of lights at the end of a tunnel, or feelings of deep peace, these experiences can resonate with many popular beliefs about the afterlife. Some view these experiences with skepticism, considering them mere hallucinations induced by physiological factors such as a lack of oxygen in the brain. However, the similar nature of these reports coming from people of different cultures and religions suggests that something deeper may be occurring. Conclusion. Death is, without a doubt, one of the greatest enigmas of human life. The fear of death is something we all face, and the search for answers is a journey that unites us all, regardless of our beliefs or cultures. Whether or not you believe in life after death, these stories and testimonies remind us of something deeply human, the need to find meaning, comfort, and hope in the face of the greatest mystery of all. What does this mean for us? Now that you have heard these shocking and mysterious clinical death stories, it is impossible not to reflect. What does this really mean for us? Is death truly the end of everything we know, or is there something beyond? The most fascinating thing is that, regardless of our personal beliefs, these experiences remind us of the fragility of life and the importance of living fully in the present moment. So what do you believe about the other side? Do you think death is really the end, or do you believe there is something beyond what we can see and understand? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Let's create an open discussion space about this deep and mysterious topic.